Okay. Well, it's lovely to see everyone. Thank you all for coming. Before we start, a couple of small pieces of housekeeping. For those of you covering this event for radio, you'll find in the first 3 rows a splitter socket for you if you need to record audio. And of course, the second point, please just check that your devices are all on silent or vibrate for us. Thank you, and without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ian and Sally.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Spring Media Conference. It's really great to see you. Thank you for joining us, whether in person or online. I'm Ian Hewitt, Chairman of the All England Club, and alongside me is Sally Bolton, our Chief Executive. For those joining us today in person, we're delighted to be hosting this media conference in our new media theatre, which I hope you are enjoying. This theatre is the centrepiece of our new media pavilion, offering state-of-the-art facilities for the international media and broadcasters covering the championships. Around you will find a further 7 interview rooms, an outdoor broadcast mix zone, and 2 levels of bookable stand-up and presentation positions for our rights holders. We are confident that this will be a fitting stage for the nearly 1,500 interviews with players that will take place during the fortnight. Now to today's agenda. We will cover 2 broad themes, an overview of our plans for the championships and an update on future developments around the estate. To start with, we look forward with real excitement to the championships and are pleased that early indications are of very strong interest in attending Wimbledon this year. Our Wimbledon public ballot, now in its 99th year, opened in November and received an unprecedented number of applications. Encouragingly, after difficulties in recent years of international travel, we have seen renewed levels of interest from overseas applicants, in particular from the USA, Ireland, Italy and Germany. And on the official hospitality front, our partner Keith Prowse sold all their packages by the start of April, the earliest date they have done so on record. I now turn to the issue of Russian and Belarusian players. Our announcement on 31st March, made after careful and deep consideration, sets out the factors which informed our decision and why, taking all circumstances into account, we consider these to be the appropriate arrangements for Wimbledon this year. Arrangements being made with the full support of our UK government and the international stakeholder bodies of tennis. I can assure you it was a very difficult decision in exceptionally challenging circumstances. It does not lessen in any way whatsoever our total condemnation of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I will touch later upon ways in which we will continue to demonstrate our support for the people of Ukraine. Now let's turn to some of our plans for this year's event, and I will hand over to Sally to take you through further detail.
Thank you, Ian, and good morning to you all. I'm pleased to be able to provide an update on our championships planning. Operationally, we have introduced a number of changes this year. Some you will be hearing about for the first time today, and some will be a reminder of announcements made in recent months. I'll begin with an update on the qualifying competition. As you know, we currently have proposals before Merton and Wandsworth councils regarding the Wimbledon Park project, our ambition to bring the qualifying competition on site in the future. In the meantime, we have a long-term lease agreement in place covering the qualifying site at Roehampton, and we are committed to improving the facilities that we have on offer there. This year, we will construct a new show court in a more central location on the site, with a seating capacity of over 700, in addition to the new and relocated practice courts. These changes will allow us to increase the spectator capacity each day at qualifying to 3,000. We are pleased to have a retail presence on site for the first time this year, and the players will be able to enjoy the newly refurbished dressing rooms and gym. Turning now to some of our recent announcements and operational updates. Towards the end of last year, you will recall we announced an adjustment to our white clothing rule, with women now given the option of wearing darker undershorts if they wish to do so. The gentlemen's doubles format has been shortened to best of 3 tie-break sets, bringing the Grand Slams into alignment. And we have joined the tours and the other Grand Slams in participating in a 1-year trial of off-court coaching. I'm pleased to confirm that we will extend our wheelchair tennis competition by an additional day this year, increasing it from 4 to 5 days. This will give those players who reach the final stages of both singles and doubles more time for rest and recovery. Furthermore, play on number 1 court on the finals weekend will begin at 11 a.m. rather than 1 p.m. to provide increased opportunities to showcase these events on a major court and live on the BBC. Ticket holders will be able to enjoy the enhancements we've made to the Southern Village area of our grounds, with a new entrance gate in use, a big screen showing live tennis with deck chairs and weather shade, and an improved food and drink offer, in addition to our traditional official partner activation spaces. Aside from those updates already mentioned, and following the positive feedback we received, last year's event schedule will be retained. This includes play on Middle Sunday, spreading the 4th round single matches across 2 days, playing a combination of ladies' and gentlemen's quarterfinals matches on the 2nd Tuesday and Wednesday, and finally holding the mixed doubles final as the last match of the day on the 2nd Thursday. Naturally, the additional day of play helped bolster the viewing figures for our broadcast partners across the fortnight last year. Linear TV coverage in the US was up by 26% on ESPN, and in the UK on the BBC, a new record for online viewing was set, with the championship streamed 53.8 million times, which was up from 30.5 million in 2021. On the commercial front, we welcome Barclays in their first year as our official banking partner. This multi-year partnership includes the biggest ever donation made by an official partner to our charity, the Wimbledon Foundation. Together, Barclays and the Foundation are focused on using sport to help make a positive difference to people's lives, and we'll have more news to share on an exciting joint initiative a little closer to the championships. We remain firmly committed to becoming environment positive by 2030. We will again host our Environment Positive panel on the first Thursday and spotlight this important subject throughout that day. We make improvements every year to help reach our sustainability ambitions, and among the changes for 2023, we have connected our renewable electricity supply to facilities in the queue, allowing us to accelerate the phase-out of generators used during the championships. In the area of food and drink, all of our food menus for all of our guest groups will have a low CO2 dish highlighted to help our guests make environment-positive choices should they wish to do so. The most visible change, though, will be on court. Working alongside Evian, our official partner for the last 15 years, we are pleased to confirm the next step in our sustainability journey together is a pilot of an on-court refillable water solution which will offer Evian player water for the players. As part of this, we will be providing the players with reusable bottles that they can refill during their time at the championships. It has taken the Evian and Wimbledon teams many months to work through the various logistical challenges involved, but we're very excited with where we've got to, and we believe it is a great step forward. We look forward to sharing some more details of this solution in the build-up to the championships. I would like to briefly focus on a couple of our marketing initiatives. Our campaign for 2023 will be Always Like Never Before, an idea that celebrates both the traditions of Wimbledon and the unpredictable drama of sporting contests. This will come to life through various activations, including our trailer, which traditionally launches following the conclusion of Roland Garros. With our campaign in mind, this year's official poster was created by Dutch illustrator Eric van den Boom. Eric used several iconic Wimbledon elements to create an English garden-inspired border, framing the court and player. The design links the familiar traditions loved by our guests to the dramatic moments about to play out on court. In the digital space, Wimbleworld on Roblox will return, having attracted 9.8 million visits during the fortnight last year. And following its success last year, we will be bringing back The Hill in New York, with a special live screening activation taking place at Brooklyn Bridge Park. This will operate on the final 3 days of the event and will be supported by ESPN and many of our official partners. From the big screen in New York to initiative closer to home, we will install 2 big screens in the east of the London Borough of Merton for our local residents to share in the excitement of the championships. Last year's big screen in Mitcham was very well received, and so this year we will work with Merton Council to install a second screen in Morden. They'll be running from middle Sunday until the final Sunday, and there'll be free activities for the community to enjoy. Finally, as we have done for the last couple of years, we plan to announce prize money for the championships in June. I'll now hand back to Ian to continue our updates.
Thank you, Sally. I would now like to pick up on certain anniversaries and broader themes which will run throughout the fortnight. First, our support for the people of Ukraine. We will be building on last year's efforts, which included significant donations to the crisis response through the championships and via our charity, the Wimbledon Foundation, as well as a ticket offer to Ukrainian refugees who had resettled in our local boroughs of Merton and Wandsworth. This year, in partnership with the LTA through the championships, we are pleased to share that we will donate to Ukrainian relief £1 for each ticket holder at the championships this year. This will result in a contribution of more than £500,000. We will also again invite 1,000 refugees to join us for a day at Wimbledon. Working with our Merton and Wandsworth councils and the British Red Cross, this offer would include tickets, transport, food and drink for the day. For Ukrainian players, the All England Club and the LTA will be funding the accommodation cost of 2 rooms for all main draw and qualifying players and their team members for the entirety of the grass court season. All main draw and qualifying players will also be offered the opportunity to practice and train after Roland Garros at either the All England Club's courts or via the LTA at the Surbiton courts. This mirrors arrangements available to all top 10 singles players. Next, the first Wednesday of the championships will coincide with the 75th birthday of the NHS. We look forward to marking this special day at Wimbledon. This will include inviting 75 NHS employees from our local hospital, St George's, to attend and celebrate the day with us. I will also be taking the opportunity, by way of recognition and thanks, to host a number of NHS representatives in the Royal Box across the fortnight. The eve of Wimbledon this year will be the 50th anniversary of the formation of the Women's Tennis Association. I'm delighted to confirm that Billie Jean King will be one of our special guests at the championships, and we will duly recognise the contribution of Billie Jean and other members of the original 9 to the development of our sport. Another anniversary will be 10 years since the formation of our charity, the Wimbledon Foundation. It has grown continually during this time, and this year we'll be investing in the region of £4 million on charitable activities and supporting more than 100 causes locally, nationally and internationally. The Foundation plays an important role in our overall support and contribution to our local community. Just one example of our support is the ongoing relationship with food rescue charity City Harvest. Our food and drink team works with them during the championships to distribute surplus food, and during the pandemic they prepared thousands of hot meals which were distributed locally to those in need. This year, the Foundation has supported the launch of a new City Harvest food rescue van, inspiringly named Vandy Murray, which I think you might just be able to see. We must thank Andy for agreeing to have his name used in this way for this fine cause. I would like to end this section by noting that this will be Jerry Armstrong's last year as our referee and his 50th Wimbledon. I wish to place on record our sincere thanks to Jerry for his outstanding contribution to the championships. I'm pleased to announce that Denise Parnell has been appointed as Championships referee designate. A former professional player and distinguished international referee, Denise has held the role of assistant referee at Wimbledon since 2006 and will take on the role of referee in 2024. She will work closely with Jerry over the coming months to ensure a seamless transition next year. I now hand back to Sally to touch on development plans around the estate.
Thanks, Ian. It will come as no surprise that around the estate we are as busy and ambitious as ever. Continuing to strategically invest in our facilities is central to our long-term vision for both the club and the championships. The indoor tennis centre on Somerset Road is now complete, including the construction of 6 indoor and 6 outdoor courts, dressing rooms, social and meeting spaces, and the underground car park, which is the hub of the Championship's courtesy car operation. Players and their teams will enjoy a new arrivals experience this year with the completion of the tunnel underneath Somerset Road, connecting directly to their facilities in the Millennium Building. Phase 3 of our development at the Community Tennis Centre at Rains Park is nearing completion. The 16 grass courts will provide players with additional practice facilities before and during the championships. We anticipate opening the new clubhouse in the autumn, which will include changing and therapy rooms, a cafe and a multi-use function room. We're very much looking forward to the additional benefits that these facilities will offer players preparing for the championships in future years, as well as the many thousands of community members who use the centre throughout the rest of the year. The Millennium Building is now 20 years old and in need of refurbishment. During the next 5 years, we intend to transform this building, improving the facilities and offer for the 3 important guest groups housed there: members, players, and of course the media. To bring to life our current thinking and show the scope of the intended refurbishment, we have the following short video to show you. Hopefully that gave you something of a feel for this exciting future project, and particularly thinking about your working space looking ahead. So turning now to the Wimbledon Park project. As you know, our planning application is still in the process of being considered by both Merton and Wandsworth councils. Since submitting our application in July 2021, we have engaged extensively with the local community, including hosting guided tours of the proposed new community parkland. And we are very pleased to see more than 1,200 letters of support of our plans have been submitted to the 2 councils. We're very hopeful that councillors will agree that our plans are a once-in-a-generation opportunity to both safeguard the championships for the future by bringing the qualifying competition on site, as well as creating year-round benefits for our local community, including significantly increasing access to green space with a major new park for London. I'll hand back to you, Ian, for some more words before we finish.
Thank you, Sally. Well, more than a year ago, before last year's championships, I informed our board of my intention to stand down as chairman at the end of July after this year's championships, what would in normal times have been my fourth event. It has been a great privilege to help steward the club and the championships during this period. I hope you will forgive a little reflection. It has been a period with, seemingly each year, an extraordinary issue or challenge. Cancellation of the championships in 2020 due to the global pandemic, a COVID-restricted and until late in the day uncertain permitted spectator capacity when we returned in 2021, and the challenging Russia-Ukraine situation in each of the subsequent years. I am, however, delighted that following our return after cancellation, the quality and the excitement of tennis at the championships have shone through, with great champions honoured and special memories created. In terms of the event programme, I'm particularly pleased with measures we introduced, such as play on the middle Sunday and the start of our 14 and under junior event. Around the estate, completion of our indoor tennis centre and media pavilion have added greatly to the quality of our services. The strength of the grass court season is of course very important to us, and we have continued to invest strategically in a range of initiatives at all levels of the sport to promote grass court tennis. I've also been particularly pleased during this period to see the continued growth and important role of our Wimbledon Foundation and other contributions to our local and wider community. Financially, aided by our cancellation insurance, prudent financial controls and planning, and strong support of our partners, both old and new, we have come through this turbulent period in good financial health and ready to continue to advance our ambitions. Ambitions reflected in a clear strategy established during this period, focusing on three interconnected themes: being at the pinnacle of sport, being a guardian of tennis, particularly grass court tennis, and being a force for good. This continuing ambition and momentum would not be possible without a great team, able and committed, which I believe we have here at Wimbledon. I also reflect here that one of my first decisions as chairman was the appointment of Sally as our chief executive, and that was a pretty good decision. Enough of this looking back. As announced earlier this year, the board has elected Deborah Jevons as the next chair of the All England Club. With a strong combination of skills and experience, both as a former professional tennis player and through a number of leadership roles with high-profile sports organisations, I know Debbie will be well placed to lead the club in the future. We have many ambitions, opportunities and challenges ahead. In the meantime, we all look forward with excitement to this year's championships. Thank you, and now's the time for your questions.
Thank you. We'll start, as usual, with questions in the room before we switch to questions on Zoom and then wrap up. So if you could raise your hand if you have a question, please. Rob, we'll open.
Hi, it's Rob Moore from the Sun newspaper. A question to Debbie and Ian. A week ago, the snooker was marred by a Just Stop Oil protester who got on the table and did a power stunt. London Marathon consequently spoke to Just Stop Oil. They spoke to Extinction Rebellion and had a truce that their event would not be ruined at the weekend. Will you speak to environmental campaigners to make sure they do not disrupt Wimbledon? And how damaging would it be if one of the matches is ruined by someone doing a stunt?
Right. I think this is one that Sally will take on.
Yes. Yeah, not Debbie, but Sally. Well, I think the first thing to say is that front of mind and paramount in our planning for the championships every year is the safety and security of those attending the championships and indeed their enjoyment. So, as you'd expect, every year we work closely with the Metropolitan Police and other agencies in planning for the championships. And as part of that, we do a very thorough threat and risk assessment. And then our arrangements, particularly for security, are planned around those. And that's an ever-changing environment. as you rightly identify, there have been some incidents recently that will inform the planning that we will undertake. You wouldn't probably expect me to get into the detail of what those arrangements would be. And it is also fair to say we are a number of weeks away from the championships yet. So the picture is still emerging and our plans are evolving as time goes on.
Is your message to those groups, leave us alone? Because it would mar the competition if something was to happen.
Well, I think what I would urge anybody attending the championships to do is to be considerate of those that are also attending the championships. Our grounds conditions that apply to everybody that comes to the championships are very much about the safety and security of everyone attending, but more importantly, the enjoyment of everyone attending.
Gentleman on my right, and then Neil, please. Go ahead. Yes.
Hi, Rob Harris from Sky News. On the decision to allow Russian and Belarusian players to compete again, is this something you were forced into doing because there was the threat of financial sanctions continuing, the lack of ranking points impacting the event, and in an ideal world, would you prefer to have kept the Russians out? Is there a fear, as the government has warned, the fact that their participation could be used for propaganda purposes by Putin?
It's an interesting question. As I said earlier, this was an incredibly difficult decision, and I might personally say that I found this, for me, probably the most difficult decision during my chairmanship. I think our statement on 31st March set out the position as clearly as we could, namely that there were a combination of factors, and it was a combination of factors, and developments since last year which have led to our decision. Yes, there were the continued consequences which you refer to, but there were other factors, extensive discussions with government and players as to whether the declarations would work, the experience on the tours over the last year. So it's really a combination of factors which led us, on balance, and it's a difficult decision, to decide that these were the most appropriate arrangements for Wimbledon this year.
Thank you, Neil. And then Elle, please.
Neil McClellan from the Mirror for either of you. Just about the personal declarations, just the time frame involved. Is there a date if they can sign them already, and is there a deadline for when they have to sign these personal declarations?
Yes, so on practicalities, as soon as we made the announcement, players were able to sign what is effectively the player entry terms and conditions. So the declaration is encompassed in the player entry terms and conditions. So from the point we made the announcement, players were able to sign those documents, and of course that option is available to them up until the entry's deadline. And players are beginning to sign those as we speak. So that's broadly the time frame.
How many people have signed it, and is it up to what you'd expect the numbers who have signed these declarations?
Yes, I probably wouldn't share the detail of who has signed them, but a number of players have already signed them and are engaged in planning on competing at the championships.
So do you expect all Russian and Belarusian players to sign it, to compete?
We listened very much to the feedback from last year, and that feedback from the athletes was that they wanted the choice to be able to sign the declaration. So at this point, we have given the players the choice to sign the declaration. We've spent a significant amount of time engaging with those players to ensure that they fully understand what they're signing up to. And at this point, we have a number of players who are in the process of signing or have signed. And it would be hard to say where we finally end up.
Thank you, Eleanor, and then Russell, please.
Hi, Eleanor Crooks from PA Media. This can be to either of you. Just on the Wimbledon Park project, how frustrating is it that this hasn't gone before the councils yet? You haven't got approval, and how will it impact the timeline that you set out for when you wanted all the various different stages to be in place?
Shall I start off on this one, Sally, and you add to it? Look, the date for the planning committee, of course, is in the hands of the planning authority, and yes, we would really look forward to our application being heard as soon as possible. But we do recognise that this is an important, complex and long-term project. We are patient, and we fully understand that it will be approached carefully and thoroughly from all angles by Merton Council. So we're in regular communication with the council, and we recognise that it's a long-term planning process. Yes, we'd naturally, we're enthusiastic to get on with what we think is a really transformative project with great benefits for the championships and great benefits for our local community, both aspects of which we're proud and really believe in. But we do recognise that it's an important project, and we're patient, and we will work with the council, and we look forward to the hearing.
Just on the time frame, because obviously you set out the years that you wanted things to be achieved.
Yes, as I say, we recognise it was always going to be a long-term project. If you're talking about qualifying in particular, it will depend on the planning process, but our aim would be for qualifying to be on site around the end of the decade. I don't know if there's any other bits you'd like to comment on.
Yeah, around the end of the decade into the early 2030s probably. I suppose what I would say, just to emphasise the point that Ian's made, I mean, you all know that here we have a reputation for planning for the very long term, and in many ways this is really no different. And when we think about the generational shift of the quality of delivery of the championships, bringing qualifying on site, and the quality of the community benefits that we'll deliver, the planning authorities taking the time to properly assess our application is entirely appropriate. And we're, as Ian said, we're patient, but we're also keen to get going and deliver all those benefits.
Thank you. We have Russell, and then Stuart, please, and then David. Russell.
Russell Fuller from the BBC. For Sally, on the personal declaration again, I was not quite sure whether the declaration that the players are signing, is this a generic one for all players or a specific one for the Russian and Belarusians?
So it's a specific one for Russians and Belarusians. So they will have a set of the player terms and conditions that is slightly different to the non-Russian and Belarusian athletes. But we are bolstering all of the player terms and conditions to incorporate a clause around not supporting the war in Russia or either of the two regimes. But obviously competing as a neutral only applies to the Russian and Belarusian athletes.
And have you drawn up that declaration yourselves? And if so, can you give us an idea of exactly what they have to sign up to?
So the development of the wording of that declaration, obviously it is based on government guidance, which the detail of which I'm sure you've seen. That's been around now for over a year. The wording of that has been developed working with the government and also with the Tours and the ITF, and working with our partners at the LTA, so that we can have a degree of consistency across the grass court season. I think, as you probably know, there's three main limbs to the declaration. The first is that they confirm that they will compete as a neutral, so no country name or flag denomination, that statements of support for the regime, the two regimes, or the war are prohibited, as are players being in receipt of funds either from those two states or from businesses closely related to those two states.
Okay, Stuart and then David, please.
Stuart Fraser from the Times. Just for either of you, really, I'm sure you saw the scenes in Australia at Melbourne Park this year with Russian flags and so forth. Can you just run through, in terms of the security, what would happen if a spectator attempted to bring a Russian flag into the grounds, and what would happen if one was to be unfurled inside centre court, for example?
I'll go first and you
You go
can
then.
add anything you like. So our grounds entry terms and conditions have been updated for this year, and that will prohibit any Russian or Belarusian flags being brought into the grounds, as well as any other symbols or signs of support for the war or the two regimes. So, as I talked about earlier, our security arrangements are amended each year alongside a threat and risk assessment, if you like. And so the gate teams will be well briefed on what can and can't come into the grounds. So we would hope the latter point you make wouldn't happen, in the sense that a flag would be unfurled. But if it were, then our grounds entry terms and conditions are really clear.
Thank you. We're going to go David, Chris, Simon, and then we'll see how we're going for time.
David Law from the Tennis Podcast. Sally, in regard to the experiment with mid-match coaching that Wimbledon is now signed up to, I remember a few years ago your predecessor Richard Lewis and also Tim Henman were pretty categoric in their opposition to mid-match coaching. What has changed?
I think probably first thing to say is an important point of clarification. So So the trial that we are working with the other Grand Slams and the tours on is off-court coaching. It's not on-court coaching. So that the area we're particularly concerned about is on-court coaching. And so that's probably an important distinction to make. And of course, this brings us into alignment with the tours and with the Grand Slams in looking at this. And it is a one-year trial, and we'll be looking closely at what we find from that trial.
Chris.
Back to the long-term development plan. You say you've had 1,200 letters in support of your plans. There are obviously some letters against them as well. There's some local opposition. Some of that one can dismiss as the usual negativity, but there are some genuine local community representatives who have concerns. What are you doing to build bridges so that, assuming this plan does come to fruition, you don't have too many unnecessarily bruised local egos to deal with afterwards?
Thanks, Chris. Well, for a project of this kind, we do recognise that views may differ, and we refer to the letters of support, and yes, there's some against. What I would say has been most encouraging, and possibly it goes to your bridging point, is that we've seen and felt and heard overwhelming support from all those who've taken the opportunities which we have offered to visit the site with us and to hear from our plans directly. And from there, I think there's been overwhelming support. And this is obviously a question of messaging, but we do genuinely believe in the benefits that our project is providing for the local community. This isn't a side issue, it's integral to our overall plan, and we will continue to explain and be proud of those benefits as we can. For me personally, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm disappointed that I obviously recognise that there will be objections, but we are proud of these public benefits, which I think that our proposals offer, and I'm really disappointed that objectors are advocating a course which would deny residents and future generations the benefit of these substantial benefits. So it's over to us to continue to pass that message, but there's nothing better than actually seeing the site itself.
Simon, please.
Simon Campus, freelance. What the provision of 2 rooms per player and in main draw and qualifying, what's the financial cost to Wimbledon for that, roughly?
Honestly, Simon, I don't know the answer to that. Because that genuinely has not been a consideration.
Yeah.
Neil, please.
Yeah, hi. Have you invited Roger Federer this summer? And have you come along with plans to mark his achievements at the club? He's retired since the last Wimbledon.
Well, he's obviously a very great champion. We have a very close association. I'm delighted to say that Roger Federer has been making a visit here. And we just, as a member, is very welcome at any time. And yes, we will be celebrating his achievements in an appropriate Wimbledon way in due course. More to follow.
I'm going to take 2 more in the room before we switch to Zoom. Gentleman at the back and then Rob here. Thank you.
Ian Axon from Reuters Television. Could you just talk us through the thought process on relaxing the all-white clothing rule and whether that was a hard thing to make a decision on?
So I suppose going back to first principles, we always have been committed to continuing to find ways to support players to compete at their very best. And so that is a consistent approach that we take. We continue to engage with players on a range of issues. And this one, it became apparent that this one was something that was of considerable concern to players, flagged to us. We thought carefully about it. But I think it would be fair to say, Ian, it was not a particularly difficult decision to take, in actual fact.
No, I agree.
Thank you. We'll finish in the room here with Rob before I hand over to Zoom.
2 parts on the Russia situation. One, are you selling any rights to the tournament to Russian TV or any Russian state media allowed in the All England club?
No, so the tournament won't be shown in Russia or Belarus, and Russian media are not welcome at the championship.
And again, on the ban on Russian and Belarusian flags, but while showing solidarity for Ukraine. Did you consider universal rules? Because to some people, actually, some other flags from around the world can be contentious, like if someone brought in some from the Middle East, and how that could potentially be divisive too.
I think the best way to look at it, and certainly the way that we look at it, is the overarching principle of our grounds regulations, which is that we want people to come here, feel safe and secure, and to enjoy the championships. And so whilst we have got some specifics around flags, and we've always had a constraint on the size of flags people can bring in, the general principle is about people being able to come and enjoy the tennis and not be disturbed by other people. So rather than us try to deal with every possible set of circumstances specifically in the ground entry conditions, it's more about the general principle, which enables us then to address any issues that might arise.
Thank you. We're going to switch over to Zoom, so I'll hand over to Faye.
Okay, we're going to take a question from Howard Fendrich, if you'd like to unmute yourself, Howard.
Hi, good morning. Howard Fendrich with the Associated Press. Again, on the subject of Russian and Belarusian players being allowed to return to the tournament this year and amid the ongoing war, I'm wondering what feedback, if any, have you received on that reversal of position from players? Maybe particularly from Ukrainian players, but also any others.
Take that, Sally. We've obviously spoken to a whole range of players. Some will be disappointed, but I think the majority have been well supportive. The players have been competing on tour together. It's not the easiest situation, but that is how it has been, and I think players understand the position we've taken.
Yeah, I think just to emphasise the point, I and a number of my colleagues spent some time talking to the Ukrainian players around the time that we made the announcement. It was a really important thing to do, and I think without discussing the detail of those conversations, I think it would be fair to say that they understood the situation. As Ian said, they've been competing on the tour with Russian and Belarusian athletes for a year. They understood the situation we found ourselves in. They understood our decision. They were thankful for us taking the time to have that conversation with them. And as you know, I mean, you've been asking players since the decision was made what their view is. So I think that's probably pretty well reported at this point.
If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. We don't have any other raised hands, so I think we can.
Okay, Stuart, we'll take one back in the room.
On the expansion of the wheelchair event by a day, am I right in saying you haven't exactly expanded the draw sizes, so they remain at 8? Why is that? Because other slams have gone up to 16.
Yeah, at this point we've got no plans to expand the draw sizes. The changes made are about enabling rest and recovery for athletes that are in both the singles and doubles draw and advance to the latter stages of both. We've got no plans to increase the size of the draw, but the wheelchair competitions are hugely important to us. And you might recall that last year we did increase the size of the quad draw, and we'll continue to look at how we can enhance those competitions. And I talked a bit earlier about the way in which we are working hard to enable more focus on the wheelchair competition, particularly on that finals weekend, looking at changing the timing so that we can enable those matches to be played on bigger courts and have a bigger audience, hopefully on the BBC.
Okay, we're going to wrap up with the last question from Chris Bowers.
It's another one on the Russia-Belarus thing. In Indian Wells this year, a journalist asked Daniil Medvedev for a comment about an aspect of the war. The moderator said, no, that's inadmissible. And Medvedev said, no, I'm happy to answer that. If something similar happened at Wimbledon, would the moderators be under instructions to completely rule that inadmissible, or is it up to the players whether they answer questions, given that they've had to sign this declaration?
It's a really interesting question, and I think the answer is we are asking the players to sign a declaration if they wish. We've been very clear with the players about the things they need to consider if they're signing the declaration. So it is about them taking personal responsibility for signing those, and we believe that the athletes will sign those in good faith. I think perhaps the important distinction in that particular incident is the difference between making supportive comments about the regime or the war versus any comments about the war. But of course, we're talking about one particular set of circumstances, and it's hard to hypothesise about what that might look like in the championships.
Yeah, because Medvedev was very careful not to say anything that would damage his family back in Russia, but that's his choice. Is that going to be of any concern to you, given the declarations?
Well, the declarations that the athletes will sign are about not making supportive comments of either regime or the war.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Hand back to Ian.
Right, well, thank you. In that case, that brings us to the end of this media conference, and thank you again for your attention and, if I may say so, for your support and engagement with our special championships. I'm sure we will continue to be in touch regularly in the lead up to the championships, which we all look forward to. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. If you need to file, there's plenty of desk space out of the door and on the right. Sarah's team are here to help you and get you settled, help you get connected to the Wi-Fi and so on. For everyone else, you're all, of course, very welcome to join us at the number 1 court, Debentures Lounge, which is just across the way. So it's not raining, thankfully. Yes, we'd like to see as many of you as possible there. And thank you very much for coming.